Starting. Okay, great. Hello. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, well, formerly Twitter, X, Instagram, at Carrie Monahan X. I'll be getting a TikTok soon, so I'm trying to start that out. So today I just wanted to talk about resource acquisition among women and how important that is and how much it's been emphasized to me. I'm 29 and I have yet to sleep with a man that has abundant resources. And I know that this is a real problem. I've learned from academia that sexual economics theory says that I should have this as my top priority, that I need to find a man that has lots and lots of resources. Um, but it's really, really interesting, just in terms of like the way that women are raised, right? The way that women are raised, the way that we're raised from girlhood to kind of fulfill many of these gendered stereotypes, right? And it's a lot to dive into, and I'm gonna piece by piece, I'm gonna go into it a lot on this channel. But I did not grow up in a situation where there was a lot of like pro gender conformity. I'm criticized a lot for this. In fact, it was the opposite. Kind of just like fuck society, fuck what they're doing, do your own thing, fuck them. And I've been told that I have like amassed a lot of issues because of it, um, which is fine if people want to think that way. And I'm looking at the camera, okay. Um, but I think that it's really interesting. If you look at the data, and I don't trust academia, like we don't like each other, so I could look at like the data that they care about, and I could say, well, it says this or it says that, but um, it's a very, very patriarchal institution. Um, it definitely that definitely varies. I think when you get more into the natural sciences, when you get into biochemistry and stuff like that, where people have to have like advanced knowledge at the molecular level, it may be quite different, and it seems to me that it is quite different. But really, when it comes to the social sciences, there's a lot of just bickering back and forth about stuff that doesn't matter. And I hope I'm looking at that right. Okay, I'm looking at the camera now. There's a lot of bickering back and forth about things that don't matter, and it's very annoying to me. And I really don't want to be a part of it because it's negative. Um, it's just like bad energy. But I've been sucked into it because I was interested in it for like a particular period of time. But it's a very patriarchal institution. And we could go over all the evolutionary psychology of this, about how men uh, go after youthfulness and physical appearance, and they're highly visual, and they just think about sex all the time. And this is very different from women because they're looking for investment in offspring. So um, so I understand that, and nobody seems to understand the difference between genes and expression of genes. So expression of genes, and again, I've said this already, like behavior is like a thermostat, right? So it's turned up or down by the environment. So like you can even say that the thermostat itself are the genes, and then the genes are turned up or down by the environment. So getting to epigenetics and stuff like that. So we're seeing how the environment shapes genetic expression, and it's not even just environment in terms of the social or the physical environment. You could look at like methylation of genes, where genes are turned on and off, that type of thing at the biochemical level. That's something that happens. My concern is that a lot of this information is being used to justify politics, right? Sociocultural standings of men and women, sociopolitical standings of men and women. So no matter how you want to put it, the social commentary about this data, and I'm not denying the data, but it's wildly inappropriate on a social level. And I know that it's also wildly inappropriate for me to go to a slut walk and protest the sexual objectification of women when I was 19 years old and do it in a totally hippie way where I was doing a peace sign, and hell, I may have burned the American flag if I had decided to do that, right? Or a bra or something that the hippies used to do. But I think that what it comes down to is social experience. And there's a lot of people in the social sciences that are getting PhDs that who are doing things that anybody could do. Like anybody could study them. They're just studying them at the quantitative level, and they're things that could just be gained from social experience. So, there is this theory in evolutionary psychology called sexual economics theory. Kind of ties into social exchange theory. And basically, it says that women, in short, exchange sex for resources from men. So, I'm not denying that that theory is correct for many women and the lifestyles of many women. But there is something that needs to be considered here, and it's the environment of the individual. And I'm going to drive that point home. It seems to me, and I will go into this in other videos, that the women who are utilizing sexual economics theory the most are women that maybe had genetic predispositions reinforced heavily by the environment. So in other words, maybe they were just rewarded instead of interacted with. So they were just rewarded by their parents, by their fathers. That was modeled to them. So of course they're going to be looking for men that can shower them with resources. And a lot of people will say, well, no, well, wait a minute. We're looking at this from an evolutionary perspective, aren't we? Okay. Well, historically, in many societies, if you weren't like a queen or a noble or something like that, you were a woman who needed to reproduce, and you needed to find a man that could take care of you and kind of fulfill that father role figure once your dad wasn't around. If we want to look at Western cultures, okay? If you didn't have resources, you needed to find a man who did. And that was difficult. That was a necessity because birth control didn't exist. Birth control didn't exist. If women had sex, they were pretty much screwed, or at least any kind of birth control that we know about or that we would regularly use, it didn't exist. And so if women had babies, they were just screwed. They had to basically stay with the guy and raise those offspring. They had probably had a lot less sexual experience because of that, which made them emotionally immature. And so of course they would be looking for men that have resources that single them out from the rest of the group or the rest of women or something like that. And this is a theme that I'm noticing. And people that have, and this is something, okay, a theme that I'm noticing time and time again is this idea that women want to be put on this pedestal and treated in a special manner, right? So let's just break this down. Okay, so sexual economics theory, or sexual economics theory would say this. They would say that female sexuality is valuable and male sexuality isn't. Male sexuality is disposable, female sexuality isn't disposable. This probably comes from the fact that due to greater male variability, probably something like that, that men were competing for women. And so this kind of arose out of that. You know, the ancestral environment was quite different from today. There's a lot of violence, a lot of unpredictability. Civilizations didn't exist. It's very different from today, okay? And it's kind of reinforcing these primitive social narratives is just extremely damaging. But let me get back to the bigger point. Let's talk about what exactly that translates to, right? And what girls have been taught, and what every girl that you probably know, daughter, cousin, niece, whatever, friend of yours, has been taught. This has been reinforced for women for decades, and it is why women are so easily exposed to predatory men. So this is this idea that female sexuality is prized, it's valuable, and male sexuality is disposable. So female sexuality can be won over by men when they compete for it. This is like totally archaic, but it's something that academics still practice. So I guess we have to talk about it. And this archaic way of living was the reality of women for a long time. Now, as I've said already, women didn't have birth control then. So if they had sex, babies came out, most likely that was that. They had to raise babies. Women were, for that reason, quite frequently in many societies around the globe, they probably were raised to do exactly that, to prepare to be mothers. And because of that, they lacked sexual experience, they lacked social skills, so they couldn't, if they met a man, they couldn't maybe look around to see, oh, is he treating other people with respect? Is this something that I value? The way that women would be raised today with normal social skills that are pretty similar to those of men, to those of, girls are raised in a similar way to boys in terms of social skills. This probably wasn't prioritized back in the day. So, of course, a woman isn't going to give a shit if he's disrespecting everybody else, but he's respecting her and putting her on a pedestal and rescuing her from the castle. Of course, that's not going to be a problem. Considering all of that and kind of the emotional immaturity that women will end up developing in those environments because of how they're being raised. Of course, they're going to sleep with a guy because he has resources and not because he has a good character or because he treats other people well or even that he is like a